Donald Trump has gone silent after his disastrous 4th of July event where he has now turned Washington, D.C. into a literal toxic pit. Of course, Donald Trump's destruction of the United States of America's democracy turned it into a toxic pit. But quite literally, the air quality is so bad right now in Washington, D.C. following that fireworks display where there was so many fireworks in the same location, you couldn't even see the fireworks. All you saw was a cloud of smoke. And as everybody warned, this was going to put very dangerous chemicals into the air. Let's take a look at what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. Hazardous firework-induced smog continues to hover over Washington, D.C. this morning. Avoid outdoors if you can. The air is so filled with microscopic particles that it is potentially very, very harmful for people who breathe it in. And so while it is slightly cooler today than it was yesterday, DC right now quite literally has the worst air quality of any city on planet Earth right now. That's how bad it is. It's the highest alert code right now for dangerous air quality as a result of what Donald Trump did. You know, his last post was, again, attacking the United States, and this was his last message on July 4th. Over 273 Americans have been shot since the Iran war began in Chicago. You mean since you did an unlawful and catastrophic invasion of Iran and then you destroyed the American economy? You know, also, Donald, you don't have to invade cities with ICE and Border Patrol. You know, if you want to, you can fund the FBI rather than, you know, firing all the FBI agents because you're afraid that they're part of the deep state that's out to get you. In any event, just take a look at some more of these photos of what the air quality looks like in Washington, D.C. It's still covered by smoke. I mean, it just looks like
it's more racism. Because essentially what you're saying is that black people, we know y'all know all about going to jail. To be clear, this guy has 34 felonies. I've never been arrested for a traffic ticket. I do want to be clear that there are black folk that haven't actually experienced jail. I have been in jail, obviously, as a former criminal defense attorney. But I do want to be clear that, as Kendrick Lamar says, they are not like us. He is not like us. So for my clients, I've never had one that had this many charges pending against them. But I've never had anybody come close to him and somehow still be walking free pre-trial. That's not how we get treated when we end up getting locked up.
Here is the sentence that made an entire congressional hearing room go dead, silent, and then erupt, all in the span of about 4 seconds. A moment that has since been replayed, quoted, and argued over for more than a year without ever actually being answered by the people it was aimed at. Last time I checked, the First Lady had none of those accolades under her belt. It doesn't take an Einstein to see that the math ain't mathin' here. That is Congresswoman Jasmine Crocket of Texas, live, on camera, during a House Judiciary Committee hearing supposedly about restoring integrity to the American visa system, turning the entire conversation directly onto Melania Trump's own immigration paperwork. And she did not stop there, because Crocket has spent the better part of this administration building one of the most fearless, most consistently devastating records of live television confrontation of any single member of Congress. And this week, with the Epstein files fight reigniting, with Ghislaine Maxwell back in the headlines, and with an entire news cycle of Trump chaos stacking up around her, it is worth going back through every one of her greatest hits and understanding exactly why this one congresswoman from Texas has become one of the most feared women in Donald Trump's entire political universe. Welcome to USA Press. Tonight we go deep into the Melania visa hearing, the Epstein files war Crocket has waged for over a year, everything that has happened around Trump in the past week, and what all of it tells us about a presidency that cannot stop reacting to a single congresswoman who refused.
You know, normally a great fireworks show isn't always measured in its size, although, you know, you can say, you know, a large fireworks show can be very compelling, but usually a fireworks show has, you know, a rhythm, a pattern, you know, it builds to this crescendo, right? You know, the Trump fireworks show was literally just dumping a bunch bunch of fireworks all at the same time and just blowing things up. But isn't that also kind of just symbolic of this entire Trump regime? Just blowing things up, saying, oh, we're going to set the Guinness Book of Records, but then actually making something look so ugly and dangerous and then ignoring all of the consequences. And so a tiny man needs to do something like this. And again, I've seen big fireworks shows internationally in Manhattan. Like, it could look really cool. Not this, in my opinion. Take a look at what this looked like. What the literal F. Here, play this clip. Now, even the MAGA supporters are like, what's going on? Here are some like MAGA supporters of Donald Trump. Spent an hour and a half in a line, barely moved. We left extremely disappointed. Logistics were terrible. The fair was one of the main things I wanted to do while here. Instead, I and many others just stood in a line. Terrible. You rotten mother Fs. My family and I have been in line for 2 hours. This is absolutely unacceptable. Another person says, if you cared about safety, you'd exhibit better event planning and execution. Much of what I observed was entirely predictable. I presume you have little better than interns running your comms and contingency planning. Yesterday was disgraceful with basic heat safety measures completely overlooked. Who made the call to lock people out of the state fair yesterday, removing access to water and cooling centers? Donald Trump. His whole life, Donald Trump. He destroys things. He bankrupts things. This is what he's done since the 1970s. Frankly, before that, why do you think his dad needed to send him, to the military boarding school that he had to attend? He did it for disciplinary reason. All the guy knows, I'm sure there are good ones and good reasons to go, but he went for disciplinary reasons. His whole life has been breaking things, destroying things, bankrupting. That's who he is. He's not a builder. He's a destroyer. Joe Flood posted this image. Everything around the reflecting pool is covered in a fine layer of ash. Who knows? Maybe the ash will kill off the algae. He also posted the following. Workers are in the reflecting pool this morning, now removing the debris and ash from the fireworks. Also, you can still see it looks green. As Scott McFarlane, who runs the Washington, D.C. bureau for the Midas Touch Network, says, the morning after, as we showed you last night, the speech that Donald Trump gave was relatively empty. Maybe 1,000, 2,000 people, of the diehard MAGAs who follow him around everywhere were there. It was people like this, dressed up with the red, white, and blue hair and the MAGA Trump everything and the Trump tattoos. These people follow Donald Trump around wherever he goes. But there was massive empty areas, empty seats everywhere. Trump's speech was low energy. He was falling asleep in that makeshift trailer building that they were, having him and Rubio and all of these people as he was watching himself watch himself on state regime media, Fox. There were
in this country. And since we're talking about integrity, I'm confused as to why my Republican colleagues aren't talking about the lack of integrity when it comes to the president's family's visas. Let me remind y'all that Melania, the first lady, a model, and when I say model, I'm not talking about Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, or Naomi Campbell level, applied for and was given an EB-1 visa. And what that stands for is an Einstein visa. Now, y'all that don't know...
...to let anything slide. Before we get into the specifics of that hearing, you need to understand who Jasmine Crocket is and why she has become such a specific kind of problem for this administration. Because she did not arrive in Washington as some accidental viral sensation. She built her reputation methodically, the way a trial attorney builds a case, because that is literally what she was before politics. Crocket spent years as a public defender and civil rights attorney in Texas before running for the state legislature and eventually winning her congressional seat, representing the Dallas area in 2022. That legal background shows up in every one of her viral moments, because unlike some of her colleagues who lean on outrage or theatrics, Crockett's most devastating lines almost always follow the same structure. State the legal standard precisely, compare it to the documented facts, and let the gap between the two speak for itself. It is a courtroom technique, not a cable news technique, and it is exactly why her material tends to hold up under scrutiny in a way that pure viral outrage often does not. She first broke into wider national recognition during a memorable 2024 clash with Marjorie Taylor Greene over personal appearance comments made during a hearing.
Close to 100 hospital-related incidents that were taking place that we know about. It could possibly be more. And then as I talked about this morning, one of the things that Donald Trump was absolutely terrified of is you contrasted what was going on in Washington, D.C. to what was happening at the same time in Tehran. I mean, just think about it. Ayatollah Khomeini's funeral was taking place on July 4th. You had dozens and dozens of countries show up to Khomeini's funeral. You had millions of people show up for the Ayatollah's funeral in Tehran and in cities across Iran. And you had something projecting over there in Iran that was, very different than what you saw in Washington, D.C. And I think, Iran was aware of that, and they showcased it as well, and highlighted it while Donald Trump was out there, polluting the United States with that bizarre kind of fireworks. I'll show you what they were saying on state regime media Fox, just so you see how their propaganda works. All the hosts after that fireworks show that I just showed you there. And I mean, I guess, there's a lot of fireworks. It was dangerous, in the sense of concentrating all of that. It was loud, but this is not the way you run a fireworks. Like a cool one, as I mentioned, has rhythms, patterns. These fireworks go first, then these ones go first, then the sizzling ones go, and then they have the different. They just pop, 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 pop. As my little daughter Jimenez says, who's 20 months, pop, 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 in, pop, pop, pop. That's what it was like. And so state regime media was like, oh my God, did you see that? That was the greatest fireworks show ever. It broke the Guinness Book of Records. I didn't really see a lot of it because a lot of it was covered in smoke. I didn't get to see it. This is what they were saying on state regime media. Let's play it.
The largest fireworks display in the United States history. It's a new record that it broke the Guinness Book of World Records for 851,000 fireworks. It was all the way around this entire place.
Yeah, it wrapped us. You could see it for blocks.
It was unbelievable. What's so amazing about this, there's one part of the story. You spoke to President Trump. I spoke to President Trump. At the time, we're being told, it might rain until 2, 3. He said to me, I don't care if it's 2 a.m. I don't care if it's 4 a.m. And I'm thinking, you're still going to come. And God, I have a phrase that I use with them. I tell them all the time. I said, God loves Donald Trump because it worked out perfectly.
God bless America.
And then Donald Trump sent out his propagandists like Doug Burgum, his interior secretary.
A moment that made clear early on that she was not going to back down from confrontation with anyone in the room, regardless of seniority or reputation. By the time she walked into that visa integrity hearing in June of 2025, she had already established herself as one of the House Democratic Caucus's sharpest interrogators, which is exactly why what she did to the entire premise of that hearing landed with as much force as it did. Let's start with the hearing itself, because the setup matters enormously, and most coverage skipped right past it. On June 25th, 2025, the House Judiciary Committee convened a hearing with the almost comically self-serious title, Restoring Integrity and Security to the Visa Process. The premise, as Republicans framed it, was straightforward. The Trump administration wanted to talk about tightening visa vetting, expanding social media screening for applicants, and cracking down on what it characterized as loopholes being exploited by bad actors. Jasmine Crocket walked into that room and, within her opening minutes, dismantled the entire premise of the hearing before it had even gotten off the ground. Integrity isn't snatching lawful visa holders off the streets and throwing them into unmarked vans, she said. Integrity is not revoking visas based on social media posts that hurt somebody's little feelings because kids decided they wanted to go after Trump or this administration. We have a thing called free speech in this country. That alone would have been a strong, quotable moment on any given news day. But Crocket was just getting warmed up.
who just got sliced and diced on the morning shows, and just shows how pathetic and weak this regime actually looks. Watch Dana Bash asking Doug Burgum a very basic question about the bottom of the reflecting pool. Like, we all saw that because they poured hydrogen peroxide in the reflecting pool after it was infested by more algae than I think in anybody's worst case predictions what it was going to look like, it started to peel off and it started to form, I called it like the stingray mutant, like algae pool lining looking creatures. That's what happened. And then watch what Doug Burgum says, though it didn't peel off. It was vandalized. It was the vandals. Here, play this clip.
Half miles of expansion.
But it peeled off. Why? Why did that happen? Do you know?
It didn't peel off. There was vandalism. There was box cutters. There have been 7 arrests. There was people literally trying to destroy part of a monument. The reflecting pool is not just a pool on the mall. It is part of the Lincoln Memorial. And if anybody says that they're going to go and vandalize that, it's no different than if someone was throwing.
And you're 100% sure that what happened with the liner was vandalism. You can prove it.
Oh yeah, absolutely can. And as we drain it, we've got all the photographs we can see. I mean, there's no possible way.
The photographs of a person or people cutting a 300 or 350 foot gash in the bottom of the reflecting pool?
Dana, I'm not sure why you and others in the media think that you want to keep trying to question whether or not this is an industrial liner. Every farmer and rancher in America that's had their pickup liner lined by this sprayed on liner knows that you literally, it would never just like peel off or fall off. This is like a strong material.
Yeah.
And it's the size of 8 football fields. And the only way you can end up with actual slices in one spot and not the other is that someone physically cut it. And so but the pool itself, it's not leaking. It was leaking 45,000 gallons a day. It's finally been fixed by President Trump. And the American flag blue is working perfectly.
Okay.
And again, it's beyond me why. I mean, the real scandal is about the fact that the state of our capital was in such total disrepair that some people, no one was reporting about. No one was reporting about the pro-Hamas graffiti on the.
Mr. Secretary, you and I talked about this last month.
Yeah, and we're still talking about it.
Well, because it was July 4th and the reflecting pool was closed.
It was closed because it's surrounded by fireworks. It's closed every year on the 4th of July.
But it was closed prior to that in order to fix the reflecting pool.
But it was closed because the largest fireworks display in the country we talked about was set up, and it lines either side of the reflecting pool. You can't have people around fireworks when they're being set up. Now that the fireworks will come down, the fence will come down. The fence was there because of the fireworks.
Copy that.
And then George Stephanopoulos got his opportunity to cross-examine Burgum right here when Burgum's like, the reflecting pool was a huge success. And Stephanopoulos like, okay, then why are you draining it if it was a huge success? And then Burgum was like, 99% of the pool bottom is perfect. Okay, well, if 99.9% of it is perfect, then what are you saying? You're just contradicting yourself. So 350 foot of the lining was destroyed, but 99% of it is perfect, and it was just around. What? They're just making up the stupidest stuff. Here, play this clip.
So the reflecting pool has been a big success, and we've got the 340 million people in this country that are celebrating 250. We did have a few vandals, but all that's going to be repairable, and that'll all be fixed in the coming weeks as we go forward.
Well, you say it's been a success, but the pool is going to be drained this week, isn't it?
She then pivoted directly into the question that no other member of that committee, Republican or Democrat, seemed willing to put on the record. Why isn't anyone examining the immigration history of the president's own family? Why aren't we talking about integrity when it comes to the president's family's visas? She asked the room. And then she went straight at Melania Trump's 2001 EB-1 visa, commonly known as the Einstein visa, a category legally reserved for immigrants who can demonstrate sustained national or international acclaim in their field. Crocket laid out the actual legal criteria, methodically, the way a prosecutor lays out elements of a charge. A Nobel Peace Prize or a Pulitzer, Olympic medal status, or other documented, sustained extraordinary ability in the sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics. And then she delivered the line that would dominate headlines for days. Let me remind you all that Melania, the First Lady, a model. And when I say model, I'm not talking about Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, or Naomi Campbell level. Applied for and was given an EB-1 visa. She paused, let that comparison land fully in the room, and then closed the loop. Last time I checked, the First Lady had none of those accolades under her belt. It doesn't take an Einstein to see that the math ain't math in here. Now, Here is where the hearing produced one of the more unintentionally revealing moments of the entire Trump era. Alex Naurasta, Vice President for Economic and Social Policy Studies at the Libertarian Cato Institute, who was testifying at the same hearing, apparently felt moved to defend the First Lady's honor. "I also want to defend Melania real quick," he said. "Not everybody could marry Donald Trump, and I think that's quite an achievement, so I think she deserves credit for that. Nobody up here could have done it." Sit with that defense for a second, because it is, whether intentionally or not, one of the most devastating own goals in recent congressional testimony history. A witness called to defend the integrity of the visa process ended up conceding, in essence, that Melania's most notable qualifying achievement was successfully marrying a billionaire, which is not, and has never been, one of the 10 statutory criteria for an EB-1 Einstein visa. Crocket, without missing a beat, replied with the single funniest and most
we don't know if we need to drain the whole thing or not because, the cutting happened on the edge. And of course, it slopes from the edge. It's not a flat bottom pool. It slopes from the edge to the middle. And so we may be able to partially drain it and do the repair to be able to fix it. We may not have to drain the whole thing, but it could go very quickly. And of course, again, when you're talking about 340,000 square feet of surface, even though there was damage done by vandals that was there. It is a small, 99.99% of the pool bottom is perfect. The leaks have stopped. And so this will be quickly move on. And again, I think the press should move on too, because we've got great things going on. This is the kickoff of our 250th year. We're going to continue to have celebrations around the country. The real story here is how did we let this nation's capital fall into such disrepair, where we had
Stephanopoulos then continued to grill Burgum and say, the president repeatedly claimed vandals cut it. Do you have video of that? I don't have video of it, but if they were to do it again, we would have video of it. Watch what he says. Here, play this clip.
That vandals caused the damage. The president has repeatedly claimed that vandals cut a 350-foot gash in the pool. That's a claim that's echoed in a legal filing by your department. What specific evidence do you have to back up that claim?
Well, we have the actual cuts that were made into the industrial liner, and that's been measured out. So that's just a fact that's what we've got to go back and repair.
There's a 350-foot gash?
Well, it's multiple gashes that add up to 350 feet across that. And again, some of this happened early on. There was where we've installed more cameras. I mean, we weren't expecting that we were going to have a small group of people that wanted to try to destroy effectively what is part of the Lincoln Memorial. There's plenty of cameras around the Lincoln statue and around the memorial. The reflecting pool had gone for, decades without vandalism. But now we've got cameras up and we've got more eyes on it, and we'll that's part of the job of the National Park Service and the U.S. Park Police is to protect our monuments, and so we're in better shape now. If anyone were to do something now, we would have better video evidence of that.
But you don't have video evidence of people making those gashes.
Well, we do have video and we do have eyewitness reports, and that's up to the courts now. So that process will go forward in the legal system.
How much more is this going to cost?
I think it's going to be a small number because the majority of the work was related to the labor and the materials for the liner, and of course the new nanobubbler system, which is taken care of and won the battle against the algae, which is something in a shallow pool in hot weather has been a historic challenge, but now that's working fantastically. If you're down there today, again, as the fireworks get cleaned up from the incredible show we had last night, spectacular event celebrating our 250th. As the fences come down, we clean that up. Anybody that's there and anybody that was there last week before the fireworks started being installed on either side of the reflecting pool could see that the water was crystal clear. So that part's been taken care of. So again, we are on to the next thing because this has all been done so well.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for your time this morning.
Let me tell you how you receive an Einstein visa. You're supposed to have some sort of significant achievement, like being awarded a Nobel Peace Prize or a Pulitzer, being an Olympic medalist, or having other sustained extraordinary abilities and success in sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics. Last time I checked, The First Lady had none of those accolades under her belt. It doesn't take an Einstein to see that the math ain't mathin' here.
Most efficient rebuttal of the entire hearing. You sure are right. I couldn't have done it. The room laughed. The clip went everywhere. And Crocket had, in roughly 90 seconds, managed to get a sitting witness to publicly, on the congressional record, undermine the entire justification for the very visa category his own testimony was supposed to defend. Let's talk about the facts underneath the jokes for a moment, because as your resident obsessive, I want you to understand this wasn't just a punchline. It was built on real, documented reporting. According to a 2018 Washington Post investigation, Melania was one of only 5 people from her home country of Slovenia to receive an EB-1 green card that particular year, an extraordinarily small number for a visa category meant to be reserved for the world's most elite achievers in any given field. She had begun the application process in 2000, according to BBC reporting, at the exact same time she was dating Donald Trump, then a New York real estate figure and reality television personality. She became a naturalized US citizen in 2006, and later helped sponsor her own parents' citizenship during Trump's first term, using precisely the kind of family-based immigration pathway that this same administration has spent years publicly disparaging as chain migration and vowing to eliminate for everyone else. That contradiction sits at the exact center of why Crockett's line landed so hard. An administration that built its entire political identity on restricting family-based immigration pathways for ordinary people has a first lady who personally used one of those pathways to bring her own parents into the country, while her own qualifying visa rested on credentials that are bipartisan.
Thank you, George.
Up next, John Carl with a...
More of Dana Bash cross-examining. Let's play it.
But not a chance.
How much is it going to cost to fix? And are you going to use the same company that you did in the no-bid contract, or will you open it up to new bids?
We'll use the same company because they did a fantastic job. I mean, even with this damage of the gash that we're talking about, you're talking about, again, this is the size of 8 football fields. It is 8 acres, and we're talking about like 0.001%. Thankfully, the vandalism was small. It was bad. I mean, it could be cost tens of thousands of dollars to repair. So then it could fall into a felony thing, just like damaging any other government property could. But it is this is the job that was done to fix the reflecting pool was done extremely well. And hopefully we can move on to this and just talk about, how we can continue to do things like take care of this was a deferred maintenance problem. We have deferred maintenance.
And then on state regime media, which calls itself Fox, they figured, you know what? Let's bring on Benjamin Netanyahu today. So Benjamin, just so we know, in the past 48 hours, there have been more violations of the ceasefire, the MOU. I mean, take a look right here. Netanyahu and the Israeli forces demolished an entire neighborhood at Ben Jabal in the Al-Duwar neighborhood in southern Lebanon. More attacks on Lebanon this morning. An Israeli airstrike targeted the town of Kunain in southern Lebanon, another violation of the MOU. I mean, Netanyahu clearly wants the United States to be dragged back into this war so our economy can be further destroyed and more people can die to quench Netanyahu's bloodthirst, apparently. Also, Netanyahu announced that they will not be abiding by the Supreme Court ruling in Israel. There was a Supreme Court ruling that basically said that Netanyahu is trying to stop their media entity regulation body from doing its job. And then the Supreme Court said, no, you have to let them do their job. Very similar to how Trump has defunded and tried to stop all of these regulatory entities. And the Supreme Court said in Israel, that's illegal. And Netanyahu said, well, I'm not following what this Supreme Court is doing right here. But in any event, then Netanyahu went on state regime media Fox after violating the ceasefires, after pulling America back into war, after violating Supreme Court orders. And he says, we are not in a permanent state of war. Me and Donald Trump do multiple peace deals. Me and Donald, we're the peace presidents. We do peace everywhere. Here, play this clip.
Oh, we're not in a permanent state of war. I myself, with President Trump, we brought forth 4 peace deals. That's what we did. It's the Abraham Accords. And I believe with the weakening of Iran, which has been achieved by our common action, our common military action, I think we're going to get more because countries would like to align with us and to protect their future and also their prosperity. Israel is a powerhouse. I mean, it's an engine of innovation, of AI, of quantum, just of everything. So,
and then he says, everybody, all these countries in the Middle East want me to annex them. They ask the Lebanon Christians, say, Mr. Netanyahu, can you annex us and take us over? So that's why I do it. They asking me to take them over. Here, play this clip.
we also take care of our friends, especially the Christians in the Middle East. The Christian villages in Lebanon.
AOC, look, I think she's very nice, but she's very low IQ. And we really don't need low IQ. Between her and Crockett, we're going to give them both an IQ test to see who comes out best. Now, I took my test. I took a real test at Walter Reed Medical Center, and I aced it. I got every one of all those questions right. Now it's time for them to take a test.
A panel of witnesses, under oath, could not actually articulate with a straight face. It's worth taking a moment to actually understand what the EB1 visa category legally requires, because the specificity is what makes Crockett's line so devastating rather than just funny. To qualify for extraordinary ability classification under an EB1, an applicant generally must either provide evidence of a major, internationally recognized award, comparable to a Nobel Prize, or satisfy at least 3 of 10 separate regulatory criteria established by US Citizenship and Immigration Services. Those criteria include things like receipt of nationally or internationally recognized prizes for excellence, membership in associations that require outstanding achievement of their members, published material about the applicant in professional or major trade publications, evidence of having judged the work of others in the same field, original, scientific, scholarly, or business-related contributions of major significance, and commercial success in the performing arts, measured by specific box office or sales figures. This is an extraordinarily high bar, deliberately designed to be reserved for people at the very top echelon of their profession. Olympic medalists, published scientists, internationally exhibited artists. It is not, under any plain reading of the statute, designed to accommodate someone whose primary public documentation consists of catalogue and advertisement modelling work in European markets, which is the general characterization even sympathetic profiles of Melania's pre-Trump modelling career tend to use. That gap between the statute's actual text and the paper trail used to justify her approval is the entire foundation of Crockett's argument, and it is why immigration attorneys and policy analysts, not just partisan commentators, have continued to raise questions about the case in the years since. If you're finding this as sharp,
Donald Trump was stunned and panicking at the sheer size of the funeral for the late Ayatollah Khomeini. Tens of millions of Iranians showed up at this funeral procession. The stadium in Tehran was packed, and they kept on cycling in new groups of hundreds of thousands of people. And as I looked at just the sheer volume of the amount of people in Tehran and neighboring cities who came out to honor Ayatollah Khomeini, the amount of people who were there, one of the things that I thought to myself is, really, you were thinking about doing a ground invasion, Trump regime? You were thinking about going into that country with American troops and turning our military essentially into a meat grinder out there? That's what I was thinking as I saw those sites. I was also amazed, actually, not just at the size, but who attended these funeral processions of the Ayatollah. Dozens and dozens of countries attended, top dignitaries from these countries attended, and it seems that as the Trump regime and Netanyahu invaded to try to isolate Iran from the rest of the world, it just completely backfired in their face, and it seems more and more countries are actually there showing support with Iran. And I know not a lot of Western media is showing this. I know there's some reporters on the BBC who have hat tipped to them, hat tipped to others who are showing this and sharing this. And I just think it is important to see these images to be aware of what the heck is actually going on there, because I'll give you my own perspective, which is I do think that the Iranian regime is not the most popular thing in Iran, and I'm not being an apologist for the Iranian regime by any means at all. I do want to reflect on the situation here where there does seem to be at least in an international level, support. I mean, you had the top Chinese dignitaries. Saudi Arabia sent dignitaries there. I mean, you had a lot of people showing up. And even Donald Trump, was saying, wow, I'm surprised that there were people who were, millions of people who were crying for the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah for the Shia community, was like their pope. It's like you killed their pope, you killed their spiritual leader and the leader of Iran, who was very old to begin with, who was losing popularity within the population. He's now replaced by his son, the Ayatollah Mojtaba Khomeini, and you now made the Ayatollah Khomeini a martyr, and you actually unified the people of Iran. And even in the metropolitan areas where I think there is far less support for this Iranian regime right now, they don't want the United States and Netanyahu to take over. In my opinion, they see what's happened.
What he is saying.
It is absolutely ridiculous that I live rent-free in his mind in a time in which the American people are suffering. He absolutely consistently buys into this idea, or continues to put it out there, that women of color somehow are low IQ. Let me be clear. I have a lot more education than he does. This is just what it is, degree-wise. I have earned my degrees. My daddy didn't have to make a phone call to get me into anything because that wasn't a possibility, okay? So we can stop playing games as if I am somehow lesser than.
As we do, hit that like button right now and subscribe to USA Press. Because this is exactly the kind of full context breakdown we live for, connecting the legal fine print to the political theater every single day. Share this with someone who needs the receipts, not just the punchline. Predictably, the backlash from conservative media was immediate and fierce, and the specific shape of that backlash is itself worth examining. Right-wing commentators and social media accounts accused Crocket of being jealous of Melania, of engaging in personal attacks unbecoming of a member of Congress, of disgracefully targeting a woman's career and appearance rather than sticking to policy substance. One widely shared post declared flatly that Crocket is jealous. But notice what that response actually concedes. None of it engaged with the statutory criteria. Crocket had just read into the record. None of it offered a competing account of which specific EB1 achievement Melania had satisfied. The counter-argument was entirely about tone and propriety, never about the underlying legal question, which is exactly the pattern Crocket herself has pointed to when discussing the specific hostility she says she receives as a black woman willing to directly confront this administration. A dynamic nearly identical to the one Joy Reid described about her own firing, where the criticism generates a uniquely personal, uniquely furious response precisely because it comes from a black woman refusing to soften her language for the comfort of the room. Now, this was not an isolated moment for Jasmine Crocket. And if you have followed her career at all, you know that the Melania visa hearing sits inside a much longer, much more consistent pattern of this congresswoman going directly at Donald Trump with a fearlessness that very few of her colleagues have matched. Let's fast forward to this year, because the Epstein Files fight has become the central arena where Crocket has done some of her most relentless work, and it connects directly back to the credibility questions she first raised in that visa hearing. Back in July of 2025, as pressure mounted on the administration to release long-promised Epstein-related files, Crocket went on MSNBC's Alex Witt Reports and delivered a line that made national headlines on its own. Describing Republican lawmakers' reflexive loyalty to Trump on the Epstein question, she said, "They want to show that they're loyal to this. I don't even know what to call him. I've called him so many things, but this wannabe Hitler for sure." She went on to explain her actual reasoning, which was considerably more measured than the soundbite
in Gaza and the genocide there. They see what's going on in Lebanon in the name of security zones. They see the consequence of that. And if you look at what's going on and you study it, what I'm saying is reflective of the data that I believe our intelligence community knew, and they were trying to communicate with Donald Trump, but Netanyahu was saying, no, that's not true. Iran's going to fall right away, immediately. It's just going to be 24 hours. They're going to welcome Netanyahu and Trump as conquering heroes. Yeah, we said that was never going to happen at all. And then, Donald Trump chose to believe Hegseth and Rubio were like, this is just going to be easy. This is going to be easy. And I showed you some B-roll there at the top of of what this, funeral looked like for the Ayatollah. Let me just show you at a granular level some of the data. By the way, here's a list of the countries that sent official delegations: Turkey, India, Pakistan, China, Russia, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Iraq, Georgia, Armenia, Afghanistan, Oman, Qatar, Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Bangladesh, Egypt, Uzbekistan, Tunisia, Lebanon, Malaysia, Cuba, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Gambia, Thailand, Nicaragua, Ghana. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Millions of Iranians were outside to attend the first day of the farewell ceremony of the Ayatollah. 35 degrees Celsius heat. They prepared for that. They had mist stations right there. They're also giving out free food. I saw free watermelon. I saw, a bunch of free drinks. Show you over here as the eulogist at the Tehran prayer hall says, "We have not come to bury our leader. We have come to avenge him. Oh, avengers of the martyred leader." Here, let's play this clip right here.
اینجا مجلس خاکسپاری نیست ما آقا را امانت به آسمان می‌سپاریم اینجا مجلس قیام لله ما برای خونخواهی آمد.
Donald Trump told Axios that he was surprised about how big the crowd was, how people were crying for the Ayatollah. That shocked and surprised him. Take a look right here, some of the scenes below of the mourning taking place, and you could be like, they're paying the people to show up there. You told me they're paying millions of people to show up there. Y'all told me that they don't have any money. You said that they're broke, they're about to go bankrupt, that they have zero support, that nobody supports this regime. By the way, let me be clear again. I think that there are people there. We saw the protest in January.
Let's bring in the person he name-checked there, Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crocket of Texas. Congresswoman, your response.
The fact that you just got done engaging in a conversation where we have a president of the United States who has no idea about the oath that he just took on January 20th tells me everything that I need to know. He didn't even have good sense enough in that same interview to say something as simple as, yes, I will follow the Constitution. The thing that actually derived.
Malone suggests, I think they also are concerned about the damage that it may do. If he's trying to hide it, they understand that it is most likely problematic for him as well as the MAGA brand. At the time, a poll showed 89% of respondents supported full public release of the Epstein files, meaning Crockett's skepticism about Republican foot-dragging was not some fringe position, it was closer to national consensus. And Crockett's instincts on that front proved correct almost immediately. Trump, who had spent months publicly calling the Epstein files controversy a hoax, suddenly reversed course and began publicly pushing House Republicans to vote for release. Even reportedly holding an unusual Situation Room meeting with Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert specifically to convince her to change her vote in favor of releasing the files. Speaker Mike Johnson, who had refused for weeks to call the House back into session, specifically to avoid a forced vote on the matter, including delaying the swearing-in of newly elected Arizona Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva, who would have provided the decisive 218th vote needed to advance the legislation, also abruptly reversed his position. Crockett was having none of it. They're full of it, she told CNN bluntly, adding that Johnson violated the Constitution to avoid this. She laid out, with real legal precision, exactly how the reversal could still be used as a delay tactic. Trump had simultaneously called on Attorney General Pam Bondi to open new investigations into Epstein's associates, including former President Bill Clinton, which Crockett noted could then be used as a legal justification to keep the underlying files sealed indefinitely under the guise of protecting an open investigation. Now, he said, look into my enemies. I want you to investigate this hoax. Well, if there's open cases, then that is your excuse for legally not allowing those documents to be out, Crockett said. That is not rhetoric. That is a specific, technically accurate description.
Protest in January. I think there are people there who are critical. I think there are tens of millions of people who are deeply critical and don't want this Iranian regime. I also think in Iran there are millions of people who support the regime. I just think that's the fact, and it's a 90 million person country. It's far bigger than Iraq, and the stronghold of the regime is there. It's not a regime that can easily be toppled. I just think that's Ben, I don't like what you're saying. I'm just telling you what I think the reality is right here. Let's just play that clip right here so you can see some more scenes. Now, there were lots of people who were holding up Kill Trump flags that were raised during the farewell ceremony. Lots of writing on the walls. Saying we will kill hashtag at the Khomeini funeral ceremony. U.S. official to Axios says, yeah, many of Trump's closest advisors now think that Netanyahu was wrong about everything. Yeah, you think? You think he was wrong about everything? Of course he was. But Trump was wrong about everything. I don't view it just as, oh, Netanyahu convinced Trump. This is the president of the United States. Netanyahu tried to do the same thing with Obama and Biden and Hillary Clinton and everybody, and they didn't fall for it. They stood up. They pushed back against it. Take a look right here. Trump said that he was surprised to see Iranians crying at Khomeini's funeral, saying he thought the people hated the former supreme leader and suggesting the displays of grief might not be genuine. I was surprised to see some Iranians crying, Trump said. I thought the people hated Khomeini. Maybe it's fake tears. Trump said if we wanted to, the U.S. could strike Iran's leadership gathered for the funeral, but we won't because we want to preserve nuclear negotiations. One shot, we can take them all out. You're fantasizing about what, nuclear bombing a funeral? Like that's what you're fantasizing about? But we're not going to do that because we would have nobody to negotiate with. What a sick thing to say. By the way, here are more images right over here. I mean, you can hear, the people in Iran are pissed. They're chanting death to America at the Tehran Mosala during the ceremony of Ayatollah Khomeini. As Brett Erickson says, just to clarify, so people are trying to simultaneously make the claim that the Iranian economy is on the verge of collapse, and yet the regime is paying for millions and millions of people to attend the funeral. Does that make sense to you? No, it doesn't make sense at all. Here, play this clip. Because here's what the Israeli Persian account, the Mossad Persian account put up there. They write the following: many arrived not to mourn, but just to make sure the Ayatollah is dead. Now, do I think that there are lots of people in Iran who would like to see a regime change? Yes. I do think there are. They were out protesting. Trump said he was going to save them and make their lives better in January, and he didn't. He threw them under the bus. He said help is on the way, and then didn't. By the way, the same thing that Lindsey Graham says about Lebanon, help is on the way. But enough of this propaganda. This Western propaganda, this Israeli propaganda. Just stop. That we have to. The people didn't rise up after the bombing began, after you blew up Manab Elementary School and killed 168 little girls. And you know what I also reflect upon right now as well, because it's important that we learn our history.
From the oath that he was supposed to take. And he supposedly took an oath, which there's a lot of people that point out that he never put his hand on the Bible, even though he acts as if he could somehow be the Pope. But nevertheless, that oath specifically says that you will defend the Constitution. So the idea that you are now taking the Constitution and, as I said at the DNC, putting it through a paper shredder is a problem. And I think that this should not be partisan. This should be right versus wrong. A lot of the things that this administration is doing, they don't have anything to do with partisanship. This is right versus wrong. And right now, they are consistently wrong.
So President Trump referenced the notion you're the future of the Democratic Party. You are pitching fellow Democrats on a run for the top position on the House Oversight Committee.
Yeah.
The current top Democrat is stepping down because of illness, according to Politico, says that you're seeking that position. Do you think you are the future of the Democratic Party? And if not, who else is?
I don't know that I'm the future of the Democratic Party, but I do know that in this moment, we need people that are unafraid
of exactly the kind of bureaucratic stall tactic government agencies have used for decades to keep politically inconvenient material sealed. Let's dwell for a moment longer on that Situation Room detail, because the strangeness of it deserves more attention than it got in the news cycle at the time. The Situation Room is, by design and by tradition, one of the most secure and consequential spaces in the entire federal government. A room built for coordinating responses to national security crises, terrorist attacks, and military operations. Reports at the time indicated Trump used that exact room to personally lobby a single rank-and-file House Republican to flip her vote on releasing files related to a deceased sex offender's associates. Whatever your view of the underlying politics, the sheer disproportion of that image. The most secure room in the American government being used as a vote-whipping venue for a single Epstein-related procedural vote tells you something about how seriously this White House was treating the threat of that vote actually succeeding. Crockett's read on the maneuvering, that it represented a stalling tactic rather than a genuine change of heart, gave the political press corps language to describe what was otherwise a deeply confusing sequence of reversals, and it is worth noting that subsequent developments, the continued partial releases, the newly opened investigations into Trump's critics as a justification for continued redactions, have largely tracked with exactly what she predicted months in advance. That prediction, as it turns out, aged remarkably well.
About Iran Air Flight 655. Now that I'm recording this video on July 5th, I want everybody just to do a little bit of research on Iran Flight 655, which was an Iranian commercial flight that in 1988 on July 3rd was shot down by a U.S. battleship right there. The USS Vincennes shot this commercial airplane, this commercial flight down. It was an Airbus that was flying over the Strait of Hormuz during the Iran and Iraq War. 290 people aboard Iran Air Flight 655 were killed. The United States never apologized for it. It happened on July 3rd, 1988. And the U.S. was like, oh, the Iranian commercial flight. By the way, the pilots were like very experienced pilots who trained in the U.S. We brought our battleships in there because of the Iran and the Iraq War. A few weeks before, the Iraqis attacked a U.S. ship and killed 37 U.S. soldiers, mistaking it for Iranians. That put the U.S. military on high alert. But you were in the Strait of Hormuz with your battleships. You were in the Persian Gulf, to begin with. And then the U.S. saw this commercial commercial airplane that was flying, that was having these Iranian passengers on it. And then they claim, this is what the U.S. claimed, that they were saying, identify yourself, identify yourself. Then there was no response. They blew up the commercial airplane, the Iranian airplane, Iran Flight 655. And then they said, well, why didn't the captain respond? Because they didn't have the military signals. You were beaming on a military frequency and they were a commercial flight. They never saw the missiles that you shot at it coming. So I just want you to reflect on, did you even know that went down? Did you go Google after this video, Iran Flight 655? It's helpful that we learn our history. Then George H.W. Bush said, I'm never apologizing to them. In 1996, the U.S. ended up paying a settlement for over $100 million. That's it, $100 million, but didn't take responsibility for the action. And you wonder why the people there are livid. And then we did Manab, and then we continued to bomb them and kill lots of innocent Iranians as well. Mark Levin, one of Donald Trump's chief propagandists, one of Netanyahu's chief propagandists as well. He showed the video of the funeral procession for the Ayatollah, and Levin said, yesterday, the enemy gathered en masse, all in one place. Opportunity lost. Well, opportunity lost, he said. Well, what would you want to do? You want to nuclear bomb them? That's the goal. You want to kill millions of Iranians and kill children and women and innocent people as well. Then what happens? Just explain to me. Like, what do these sickos happen? Then you want to have millions of Americans lose their lives fighting some war for Netanyahu, fighting some war that nobody wants. You want to have millions of American soldiers die fighting those people in Iran? You see how many people, that's the end game that Mark Levin and all of these people, these neocon, these hawks, these Netanyahu agents, in my opinion, this is what you want the outcome to be. I think, by the way, Danny Citronix, who was an Israeli intelligence officer who studied Iran, I think he says it accurate. Let me just explain to you what he says. The large turnout at the funeral serves as a reminder that the assumption that all Iranians oppose the Islamic Republic has never reflected the full picture. It is also consistent with what we saw throughout the war, when large crowds gathered in cities across Iran to express support for the Ayatollah, for the state, for the Iranian regime. There is no doubt that many Iranians oppose the regime and would like to see fundamental political change, true, but it is equally difficult to ignore that the Islamic Islamic Republic retains a significant and resilient base of support that continues to stand by it even under extreme pressure. One of the key lessons from the war is that many assessments in both Israel and the United States underestimated the regime in Iran's social and political resilience. Understanding the size of Iran's missile arsenal is one thing. Understanding how deeply embedded the Islamic Republic remains within important segments of Iranian society is another. And it's not just Iranian society, Iraqi society, Yemen society, Pakistan society. In places where there are large Shiite populations, the Ayatollah is their pope.
And willing to go after this administration for the good of the entirety of the country. And I think that that is an opportunity that I would have sitting as the ranker on oversight. We will be able to conduct investigations. And as they are not wanting the American people to know about things such as what's going on with FAA, as you were just talking about Newark, or what's going on as it relates to our food, or what's going on as it relates to these firings and how that is impacting, say, our veterans that are trying to go and seek the treatment that they need. They don't want to be transparent and open with the American people. And I want to do that. I want to make sure that we are shining a light on all the darkness that they are bringing to our country right now.
So President Trump says his administration's latest self-deportation policy will allow some migrants a potential path back to the U.S. DHS also says it will pay an additional $1,000 to people who verify that they have left the U.S., people in this country illegally, who have left the U.S. and have returned to their home country. I want you to listen to what White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller said about this a few days ago.
A single illegal alien family over the course of its lifetime may cost U.S. taxpayers over $1 million. So when you give an illegal immigrant a check for, say, $1,000 or $2,000, whatever it may be, $3,000 to leave the country, you're saving taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. It also saves money relative to us having to go out and find that illegal alien and physically arrest them and deport them.
Because the fight did not end with the House vote. It escalated dramatically into this year. By February of 2026, the DOJ was releasing new tranches of Epstein-related material, including a booking mugshot of Ghislaine Maxwell, and the House Oversight Committee had moved to depose Maxwell herself behind closed doors. When Maxwell invoked her Fifth Amendment right and refused to answer any questions from the committee, Crocket walked out of that deposition and delivered one of the most quoted lines of her entire career. "We're going to be on his A," she told reporters, referring directly to Trump. "We have a 34-count convicted felon, and there are people that are still shielding him from any type of accountability as it relates to a child sex trafficking ring." She then drew a direct comparison that exposed what she called a glaring double standard in how the same committee was treating different witnesses. House Oversight Chairman James Comer had launched formal contempt proceedings against Bill and Hillary Clinton for initially declining to appear in person for their own closed-door depositions related to the Epstein matter, while simultaneously, according to Crocket, showing far less urgency about compelling testimony that might implicate Trump himself, whose name appears in the Epstein files more often than the Clintons' names do. "Bring him in, too," Crocket said flatly. "This, for the Democrats, this isn't partisanship. This is about right versus wrong." That same month, Crocket clashed directly with Attorney General Pam Bondi in a televised hearing over the multiple mentions of Trump's name inside the unredacted Epstein files. A confrontation captured on camera and replayed across cable news for days, in which images of Bondi's own briefing binder were shown containing search terms and cross-references connected to specific lawmakers' inquiries. The optics of a sitting Attorney General visibly on the defensive under direct questioning from a single House Democrat over a document trove connected to her own boss's name is precisely the kind of moment that explains why Crocket has become such a lightning rod. She is not simply throwing insults for a viral clip. She is building a public, on-the-record case, hearing by hearing, deposition by deposition, connecting the visa favoritism she raised in June to the Epstein accountability gap she has hammered since last summer. And the through line across both is the exact same accusation. There is one set of rules being enforced for ordinary Americans, and an entirely different, far more forgiving set of rules being quietly extended to Donald Trump and the people closest to him. That televised Bondi confrontation deserves a slightly longer look too, because the imagery from it circulated for days afterward in a way that pure verbal sparring rarely achieves. Photographs taken during the hearing showed pages from Bondi's own briefing binder, visible to cameras in the room, apparently containing internal notes referencing specific search terms. Lawmakers
is their Pope. They have massive, massive amounts of support there. Religious support, cultural support. And again, you can be like, Ben, why are you defending them? I'm not. We need to have realistic intelligence assessments about what's going on in the world so we're not rushing into never-ending wars where Americans are getting killed and we're having catastrophe hit our economy like we're seeing right now. That's why. And I fear that the escalation trap is still there and that Trump's going to keep falling right into it. The gap of information, as Danny Citronix explains, helped produce a strategy that rested on highly optimistic assumptions about the regime's ability and the likelihood of its rapid collapse. The fact that some observers still explain away every public display of support as simply paid crowds risks overlooking a more complex and strategically important reality. That's the reality. You can get upset at me or not, but that's the reality that's taking place right now. A few other things. Scriptural diplomacy. So as these foreign leaders showed up to pay their respects to Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran paired foreign delegations at Ayatollah Khomeini's funeral with politically targeted Quranic verses confronting rivals, or now they're building more of a understanding with Saudi Arabia, and rallying regional allies like Hezbollah and Hamas with tailored scriptural messages. Saudi Arabia received a verse about two armies meeting in battle, one believing in Islam and Quran, one not. Turkey got a verse elevating those who fight over those who sit. The Lebanese government heard a verse about people refusing to sacrifice if asked. Hezbollah was told, do not weaken or grieve, you are superior. Hamas received the verse honoring men who fulfilled their covenant with God. Some have died, others are waiting. Yemen's Houthis got a verse praising believers who fought without weakening. Qatar received a verse about forgiveness and divine favor, read as a nod to its mediating role. All of that right there was compacted into the symbolism that was taking place at these proceedings. And again, I want to share it with you just so you have a sense of what was actually going on and what was taking place here so you can see for yourself. I'll just share with you. The heads, how like the United States, like Iran is so divided. All of their branches of government hate each other and they don't know who their leaders are. Let me show you the photo. The heads of the three branches of government and senior officials attended Tehran's funeral. You can see right here the judicial, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the spiritual level, the political level, Araghchi, Ghalibaf, the the spiritual leaders who elect the Ayatollah. Mojaba was not there, obviously, because he felt that if he
any undocumented individual who comes to you that maybe they should take the money and go back to their home country. What's your take on it all?
I wouldn't trust this administration for anything. First of all, they are terrible about paying their bills, number one. Number two, most of those people that have come over, regardless of what this administration said, they came over because they were fleeing things such as the fact that they don't have the opportunity to work and earn a living, or they're fleeing political violence. And so what is $1,000 if you're going back to a place where you may lose your life? They risk their lives, many of them coming over here in the first place. That's number one. Number two, I want to see some numbers. Where in the heck did you just pull this number out of your back pocket saying that they're costing us approximately $100 million? I'm sorry, not $100 million, $1 million for each undocumented person.
Whether it is a comedian on a late night stage, a fired cable anchor building her own independent audience from scratch, or a sitting member of Congress with a law degree and a prosecutor's instinct for where the weak points in an argument actually sit. Jasmine Crocket did not need to raise her voice in that visa hearing. She did not need to call anyone names or invent a single fact. She simply read the actual statutory requirements for a specific visa category out loud, compared them to the public record of Melania Trump's actual career, and let a room full of witnesses and colleagues draw their own conclusion from the math. That is precisely what made it land so hard, and precisely why an administration that has weathered indictments, impeachments, and a felony conviction still cannot seem to let a single one of these moments simply pass without some kind of reaction, official or otherwise. You cannot indict a congresswoman for asking a question that is already true. You cannot revoke a visa hearing after it has been broadcast live to the entire country. And you certainly cannot unring the bell of an entire room laughing, on camera, at the idea that marrying Donald Trump might be the single most impressive item on someone's Einstein visa application. This is USA Press. If tonight's deep dive connected pieces of this story you had not seen laid out together before, hit that like button right now. It costs you 1 second and it puts this reporting in front of thousands more people who need to see the full picture, especially at a moment when so much of this material gets scattered across a dozen different news cycles instead of assembled into one coherent timeline, like we've done here tonight. Subscribe to USA Press and turn on notifications, because between the Epstein files, the Save America Act, and whatever Jasmine Crocket says in her next committee hearing, this story is not close to finished. Drop a comment and tell us. Was the Melania Einstein visa line, or the wannabe Hitler MSNBC moment, the single sharpest thing Crocket has said about this administration? And do you think Melania's team will ever actually respond to the substance of the visa question? Or does the silence tell you everything you need to know already? We want to hear where you land. Stay sharp, stay informed, and remember, the math still isn't mathing.